Hi, everybody. Welcome to Formative Assessment, Moving Beyond Cross, Multiply, and Divide. I am Katy Chiqui, and I work with the Minneapolis Adult Education. I am a teacher, and I'm also an instructional coach. And I'm excited to be sharing and doing this presentation with Mark.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Trushkowsky, and I just celebrated my 20th year in adult education. About half of that has been in the classroom, and half of that time has been focusing on teacher training and curriculum development. And I'm also celebrating my second anniversary of my family moving to Minneapolis, where I'm very happy to be, and I'm very happy to be here with you all.
So we want to start off by asking you guys, where do our students see proportional reasoning? And if you can chat out some examples that you know our students see in their, in their daily lives, please do so. So again, if you are just joining us, we are asking you to chat out any ideas that you have where our students see proportional reasoning in their daily lives. All right, I see cooking and sharing of chores, scaling a recipe up or down for servings, in GED science and math class, when you're shopping. These are all great examples, part of the GED components. I like that example. Things that come in sets, like 3 delicious cherry candies and the same package as 5 gross grape ones.
We will always get along because I will always take your grape ones and give you my cherry ones.
Mark, do you want to start hitting the?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so some other examples that we had come up with. Oh, here's another one, doing weight and relationship between mass and gravitational force. Very specific, thank you, Chris. Gardening, another great example. You guys keep them coming in, okay? Mark and I kind of put our heads together and we thought up a couple examples. Using maps was one of the ones that we came up with, the scaling of them. Another one was giving dosages from medicine. Doing kind of the best buy. So somebody already said shopping, right? When you're on the shopping, when you're in a store and you're trying to figure out which one should I buy. When we're talking about scaling things up and down, like Liz did today, one of the perfect examples is if you're talking about scaling up images, you're trying to figure out, how that's going to go up. And if you if you scale an image and you don't do it proportionally, then it becomes all distorted. And that was one of the fun things that I actually did with my class when we were talking about proportion. I see somebody else typed in the chat, servings per person, cooking and measuring. It's great. Another one that we came up with is when you're taking somebody's pulse. You guys mentioned cooking already. Another example that we thought up was tiles. So when you have tiles and you are maybe doing a backsplash in your kitchen or your bathroom floor, and you want a certain number of black tiles to your white tiles. And of course, daily driving.
So there were a couple of different assessments that people mentioned in the chat. So because obviously that's another place our students are going to see proportional reasoning. So I'm going to kind of scroll through some examples of the different how proportional reasoning shows up on a wide range of assessments that our students face. This could be a whole workshop. So we're not really going to have time to kind of analyze the way that proportional reasoning is being assessed, but you'll have access to these slides, so you'll be able to look at them all. So here we have the CASAS. And we have the table. I should have said in the beginning, so all of them are samples that are sample problems that are made available, except for these TABE ones. We took the ones from the TABE's form M&D and adapted them. So that's what these are. So you can feel free to use them. But we tried to, as best as we could, to keep the structure of the problem and also, the incorrect answers that are appealing. So we have the TABE, we've got the GED, which is the one that came up a couple of times. Oops, sorry, we even have the AccuPlacer, and students are applying for colleges. And then we have the TEAS exams, the test for essential academic skills. So it's basically at every level, students are going to be seeing, they're going to be assessed on their understanding of proportional reasoning. And so we're going to jump into what we're going to be doing for the bulk of our session. Chris is asking, did the high set just get approved too? I'm going to open that to question to someone. Oh, Astrid says yes. So the answer is yes. And I know for a fact, we don't have samples here, but I do know for a fact that there's also proportional reasoning on the high set. So for the bulk of our session, we're going to focus on samples of student thinking, and in particular, with two of the problems that we looked at this morning in our breakout groups with Liz. So I'm going to give you, so these two problems are two of the ones we did in our breakouts. I'm going to give you a minute to look over it and think about, just to kind of get it back into your mind. You might also think about what you would anticipate to see in student work, like how students might approach it. I know in my group, we didn't get to question 5, the one about Eduardo's bottle of juice. But I just wanted to point out kind of the general strategy that Liz used, which was she would have us work on a scaffolded model of a particular visual tool that she was trying to have us have. And then she'd let out the reins a little bit and the responsibility shifted to us. Like, so for example, in this one, it's got the double number line. And then question 5, the next one, we had to create our own double number line and make some of the choices that we need to do. So I just wanted to point that out because we have samples of students doing both of these things, and so you'll kind of get to see how they work with that model when it's scaffolded, and then how they're able to take that next step on their own, because that's a really important moment, right? Both for student learning, but then also for assessment, for formative assessment as especially, which is the focus of what we're going to talk about now.
Thank you, Mark. So just a few notes to consider about these questions before we kind of put you into rooms. These questions are going to be used kind of as a guiding framework, and they can be used for pretty much anything mathematical. We have one of the questions kind of tailored more towards proportional reasoning, but it starts off with kind of considering, what do students know how to do already? What can they do? And that's a really important perspective that we want to encourage you guys to take when you're looking at student work. Start off at what they do know, and then let's build from there. And so we want to then determine where students are at, and if they need support, what support do they need, and what extensions might we give students if they've already got it. So here's the list of questions. Again, I mentioned that these are ones that you can use moving forward when you're looking at any student work. But specifically, we want you to use these to guide your group as you explore the student work that we provide. And these questions will hopefully help you be ready to share out at the end one observation, notice, wonder, or question that arose for your group.
And one last logistical thing, you'll have about 5 minutes. You're gonna be looking at 3 samples of student work, and so you have about 5 minutes for each.
That's right. Thank you. So So you should be entering into your breakout rooms.
Yep, as soon as Christine has this done, I think I got it. And I just want to verify, we've got 16 minutes with a 2-minute warning, correct?
Mhm.
Yes.
Perfect.
And
16.
just to jump in to let people know that your guiding questions are in the chat. And you also have a link to a Jamboard that you'll be using in your group. So please make sure to note which group you're going into as you go into your group, and then you can access the Jamboard.
Hey, let's try this.
Christine, Mai just is joining now, and she'll need to go
Yep.
into group 2.
Yep, I just put her in.
Okay.
There she
Deanne
is.
or Kayla, do you need any assistance getting to your rooms?
There we go.
Great.
Okay, Mark, yep, you can
Cool.
jump to group 3 if you want, or I think you can move around as a
I'm actually going to
co-host.
try to check in with each one. So cool. So I'll see you guys in a little bit.
Okay, great.
Sounds good. Oh, I should have put maybe one more into room 4. But it's Chris Kloss and Laura Malott, and they'll just be like,
Yeah, they will have a
Oh.
lot to say.
ask
What's
for
wrong?
in-room help.
Who's asking for help?
Gosh, I'm sorry. Hold on one second, everybody. When I got bounced from the room, all of my things closed.
Mine too. I think that's what Liz was talking about earlier today.
Just wanna open my chat so I can hear from you all. Okay, awesome. So welcome back. Thank you all for allowing me to come in and be a fly on the wall of your group. I heard a lot of really interesting things. Katie and I made the decision. We really wanted to prioritize like your time analyzing and your time able in your small group to talk to each other. So we're not going to be able to get to the depth and the richness of everything that you guys talked about. But we'd like to spend maybe a couple of minutes if we could on each student. Student A, B, and C. I know they kind of were in different orders. We just wanted to make sure every student got people's eyes on them. But we're going to go in order: student A, B, and C, and we'd love to hear just from a few volunteers. Share out one thing you noticed or one thing that stood out to you from that student's work, or an aha moment. Kind of anything that you'd like to share, and you can unmute yourself, or and share, or you can feel free to do it in the chat too. But hopefully we'll get a little people talking. And just as a heads up, I pride myself on not fearing the crickets. So.
Well, our group just noticed, we liked how they shaded that first portion up until what the question was asking for. So it's like just another level of visualizing, those increments. And so whereas the other examples didn't have that really shaded in, we kind of liked how they did that.
Mm-hmm. So that was definitely something that I heard in almost every group that I was in while they were talking about student A was liking that visual. Can I have someone maybe from a different group than from Emily who, like, what do we like about that? What is a positive about that? The fact that she's coloring in the sections.
I think she clearly understands that, you know, it's part of a whole. There's a portion that's shaded, you know, out of the whole. And I think that was when we were comparing it to the other student who was somehow missing that there was a whole involved.
Right, and just looking at this as a teacher, this is her form of showing her work. So not that there's only just a double line there, you know, there you can see her or him, you know, shading that in, showing that type of work of how they got to their answer.
So I'm going to move us, you can keep, if you want to say anything about student A, you can drop it in the chat, but I'm going to move us forward to student B. Anything that people noticed? Any aha moments? Anything that came out when you were talking about student B that you'd like to share? Or ask?
Well, we realized that the student didn't seem to understand the concept of the equal increments on the number line, how they started out with just 50 between them, the 50 and 100, and then everything else is by the hundreds just to get it to fit. So they put stuff on the number line, but they didn't really use the number lines to come up with their answer. They had, it seems like they knew about, you know, cross multiply and divide. So they just use the numbers from the problem, you know, the 30%, there's 30, there's 100, we've got 900 students. So just multiplied 100 times 900 divided by 30 and came up with 3,000. So it's not even a reasonable answer since there's only 900 students in the class.
Mm-hmm.
So just, yeah, doing math that they seem to have heard of before, but not utilizing the visual. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for that, Lisa. It's, you know, it's interesting. And this is what I was just talking about or listening to another group talk about that idea. They multiplied 900 times 100 and divided it by 30. Like they did a calculation that I would not want to do. But they were able to do it, right? The challenge was not that they didn't cross multiply correctly. It's that they set it up incorrectly, kind of without understanding what it was doing. And it's interesting to me, like they do the cross multiplication of the top. They do the number line because they're asked to, right? But they're missing the key idea that of these equal increments. And then they just go back to their 300, right? They're not really making sense of the problem. They're just, like you said, putting those numbers in and to the procedure that they're thinking is what's expected of them. We've only got a couple of seconds. Is there one comment anybody would like to, poor student C? I knew that they wouldn't get their due. But is there anything anyone would like to say about student C?
Our group talked about it was hard to see if how student C actually got the numbers that they're giving us. It's not clear that they used that number line or how they used it, or if they did something else on scratch paper and then turned this in.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you, Abby. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it back to Katie and we're going to talk about using student work in a different way.
So first of all, if like you have questions about anything like that we covered today that you want to talk more about, please feel free to reach out to Mark or myself and we will be happy to connect. So the next thing is that as Mark and I were like preparing for this presentation, he made the comment that like oftentimes he spends just as much time in his classroom talking about a problem and the strategies that he uses like to solve it, like in his classroom, like with the students, as they actually spend solving it. So let me say that again. Often, like in the quote, he says, oftentimes we spend just as much time talking about the problem and the strategies we use to solve it as we do to solve it. So like what happens during that time? And so one of the things that we wanted to share with you were 2 approaches that you can use with your students. And these approaches do require you to be intentional and also be very flexible. And it's something that may feel very uncomfortable at first, but it's extremely helpful for students, and it allows students to drive the classroom and the teacher kind of just to take the role of the facilitator. So when you're showing student work, order is very, very important, and you can have 2 different purposes for showing student work. Well, there may be more, but we're just going to get into 2. The first one is that you're able to show multiple ways to get to a correct answer. And so this allows students to see that that even if they got to the answer a different way, that way is just as okay. And you can strategically build upon those models to allow you to move from concrete approaches that use pictures and diagrams all the way to abstract, where they're using maybe tables and equations, and it allows you to kind of show that arc. And this is a method that allows you to put multiple student voices into the space to discuss and to celebrate the different approaches that students are using. Purpose 2 is slightly different. And it kind of allows us to focus and zoom in on like key mathematical things, specifically being able to explore like maybe a certain representation that you want to zoom in on, drawing out mistakes everyone can learn from. So the idea that just because a student didn't get to the correct answer, it doesn't mean that they weren't doing something correct. How can we continue to build on that correct thinking? Also to extend student learning and deepening. So for example, I think it was student, I'm gonna label them incorrectly. The one that colored in the boxes, I think that was student A. Student A was able to, kind of move through the whole thing and seemed like they were ready to move on. And so one of the ways that we can extend their learning and deepening it is by asking them to explain and like their mental thinking behind the moves that they chose. So what we're wanting you guys to do now is to kind of give you some time and space to think about as a whole group now, what student would you guys choose to start with? Because being able to show the multiple ways to solve a problem in this case didn't make a ton of sense. But if we think about the second purpose of being able to either build on a student that already kind of has that idea and kind of pull their students up to it, or starting with one that's maybe lower and being able to extend that student's understanding using other students to support them. We're interested to hear kind of like what option you would pick and maybe why you think that that would be the best one.
Sorry, I was muted. One of the things that makes, I think it's really useful and helpful for me and to look at student work, especially with other teachers. But one thing that makes it kind of complicated is the goal of the activity it really depends. And so we're going to give you a mathematical goal of the activity. If our goal in having our students work on those 2 problems was really to focus on how to use a double number line as a tool to support proportional reasoning. If that's the goal, which of those students would you have share? So we've only got a minute or 2. But we offer that question, which student or students would you have share and why? And then kind of like as a sub question of that is how can that student's work help all students reach their mathematical goal? And then also what would you want to have come out of that discussion of their work? What would you want to highlight? What choice did they make that you would, what is the choice that they made that you would want to unpack or help make explicit? And so whoever is the first voice, you get to choose which student we'll have a couple of minutes to talk about. Anyone? Any takers? Student A? Student B? Student C?
Don't be shy.
There's no right or wrong answer to this. I don't know if I think Katie did say that, but
I'm torn between student A and student B. I love how student A's is really clear and represented. So it's a good example of how to do it. But student B, I feel like there's a lot that students can learn from the mistakes that student B made, because they did do some things right, which can be celebrated. Like you said, they did the math calculation right, but also it would be a good learning thing to actually bring them back to the number line and how to use that. So torn between those two.
Mhm. Oh, there are a couple of voices in the chat who want to put a vote in for C. Can either Chris or Jess, would you mind saying a little bit about what you see in C that you think would benefit everybody?
I like what I'm seeing on C, but I think Abby said we don't really have a lot of their work shown other than they drew the model correctly. So it gives us a lot of space to talk about it and discuss like what you do, where these numbers come from, and like open that conversation up. And then hopefully student was the one B that has their number line drawn incorrectly has an opportunity to compare their work with this work and find their mistake as we unpack it. And I also really like where student C ends in part B, where they've got 30 over 100. So now we can have a conversation about reducing it or something like that. Everybody doesn't just look at student A and be like, oh, they get it, I don't get it, I feel stupid.
Awesome. I can't believe we actually, so many amazing ideas came out. We only had 2 minutes, and you guys, I was really, thank you all, because again, there's no right or wrong answer, but those are all really interesting ways to think about which one to look at. And so we're at time, and so I want to be mindful of making sure that you guys get a break, but 45 minutes is a wild amount of time to do anything in. And so let's continue this conversation. It's, formative assessment and thinking about student work is something that Katie and I really love to do. We have each other and we love to do it with each other, but we would love to do it with you too. So that's our contact info. There are a couple of additional resources up there. I'll drop the links to them in the chat. Or Kate or Astrid and I will both do it. Thank you, Astrid. So we'll hang out. The next session is at 2:15. I'll hang out. I'll speak for Katie. I think she will as well. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to the presenter. Thank you to the ASL interpreters. Thank you to you all. And enjoy your next session.
Next session starts at 2:15.
Mm-hmm.
And I did chat out the link to the flyer. It's above the chat with the resources. So any of you can click on it and be all ready to go at 2:15.
Thanks, everybody.